It was late summer here in Toronto, a perfect Friday evening on Bathurst Street. The roaring swell of Tot Shabbat was fading into the sounds of parents chattering and children playing. The golden setting sun was filtered through the brilliant foliage on our front lawn. It turned almost pink. A gentle breeze was blowing away the early August heat. It was, in a word, idyllic. The great 20th century Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote these words. I felt it fit the moment perfectly. A thought has blown the marketplace away. There is a song in the wind, joy in the trees. Shabbat has arrived in the world, scattering a song in the silence of the night. Oh, eternity utters a day. Oh, eternity utters a day. And then it was broken by a piercing wail, a soul-deep cry. A little girl, no more than 3 years old, one fist balled up in rage, the other trembling as it held a small plush unicorn. Her mother was trying the time-honored and true parenting tactic of, it's time to go. I've told you it's time to go. I am going now. And was walking slowly towards the car, knowing full well that her child would soon follow along. It was not going well. Caught between anger at being told it was time to leave, the primal fear of being alone, and the stubborn stiff-neckedness of our Jewish people, which might be best exemplified by a toddler, her body frozen in place, eyes burning with tears, her only possible response, that terrible wailing cry. Swiftly, before any adult nearby could do anything, it was taken out of our hands. My 3-year-old daughter, Sella, walked up to the screaming girl. She put an arm around the other little girl's shoulder. She patted her gently. You should go to your mummy. The crying girl looked at my daughter. She swallowed bravely, nodded, and dashed off without another word, straight to her mother's waiting arms. I stood stunned, swelling with pride and confusion, thoughts going through my head. Who taught you that? Where did you learn to reach out and comfort the stranger? How are you so wise? Who's this sweet, empathic little girl? And Sella looked at me and ran up and smiled and pulled on my hand, and she said, Abba, get me another freezy. I want a red one. And in the blink of an eye, my tiny sage retreated, and she was just a 3-year-old again, in summertime, covered in sticky sugar, forgetting her manners, and that talent for soul-deep kindness in her eyes, it must have been as unremarkable as breathing. Starting this year, amongst my dearest friends, each of us now have children that are old enough to talk to us, to interact with us, to respond to us in ways that's different from newborns and babies. Perhaps you remember that transition, maybe you're in it as well, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's unfamiliar, maybe it's many years removed, or maybe it's many years to come. I promise, no matter what age or stage you find yourself in life today, I am not offering parenting tips. My goals this morning are more universal. It will not surprise you to hear that our next generation already has opinions. They have likes and dislikes, preferences and personalities. They can surprise us in amazing ways, tell full stories seemingly drawn from nothing, delight us with their kindness and love, and word for word remember conversations we had months ago. And of course, they challenge us. They challenge our thinking about priorities and values. They challenge our expectations of them as children, of ourselves as role models, teachers, older siblings, guardians. And they wouldn't be the next generation if they didn't challenge our patience, too. In the Talmud, it is stated, Da'amar Rabbi Hanina, Harbe lamadati me rabotai, umechaverai yoter me rabotai, umitalmidai yoter michulan. Rabbi Hanina said, I have learned much from my teachers, even more from my friends, but from my students, I have learned the most of all. Between this ancient line of wisdom from our Talmud, my own adventures as a parent this year, and a particularly exceptional book, I have been thinking a lot about what we learn from life's great students. What do we learn from children of all ages? What do they have to teach us? I need a philosopher. Hank was standing in his bathroom half naked. Did you rinse? I need a philosopher, Hank demanded. Scott, Julie shouted, Hank needs a philosopher. I am a philosopher, and no one has ever needed me. I rushed to the bathroom. Hank, I'm a philosopher, what do you need? He looked puzzled. You are not a philosopher, he said sharply. Hank, I am a philosopher, that's my job, what's bothering you? He opened his mouth and said nothing. Hank, what's bothering you? There's something in my teeth. A flosser. Hank needed a flosser. A philosopher is not something that people need. And people like to point that out to philosophers. This is how Dr. Scott Hershowitz opens his brilliant book, Nasty, Brutish, and Short Adventures in Philosophy with Kids. Hershowitz is a professor of law and philosophy at the University of Michigan, and throughout his book he explores high-level philosophical questions through the eyes and the words of his two young children, Hank and Rex. Do human beings have inalienable rights? And do they still count at bedtime? How serious is it to call someone a floofer-doofer? And does it warrant a plot for dark, terrible vengeance? Is it ethical to use animal training psychology to shamu a child or your partner to get them to act more the way you like? And do your parents and God owe you answers to your questions other than, because I said so? You may be thinking, well, what do young children have to do with high-level philosophy? Hershowitz uses some of those questions and stories to teach that the most important beliefs, assumptions, ideas that human beings hold are yet to be determined by children. Hard truths and lines of questioning that adult minds have set and determined are still up for grabs in the minds and hearts of our little ones. Adults, he says, know a lot about the world, but kids can help them see how little they actually know. Kids are curious and courageous, where adults tend to be cautious and closed down. Their honest questions challenge our deeply held assumptions. We see this openness and courage in the ancient story from the book of Samuel, which is linked to our Haftarah this morning, about Hannah and the Kohen Eli. As part of her prayers, Hannah promises that her firstborn son will serve God all the days of his life, and Hannah fulfills her promise and dedicates her son, Samuel, to service in the Mishkan. The text tells us the word of God was rare in those days, prophecy uncommon, but that was about to change. Samuel was sleeping near the ark, and God called to him, Samuel, Samuel! And the young man got up, and he called out, I'm coming! Because he thought it was Eli, the Kohen, the man who was raising him. But Eli just said, no, go back to sleep, I didn't call you. God called again, Samuel, Samuel! And again he ran to Eli. Eli sent him back to bed once more. A third time God called, and Samuel again ran to Eli. Eli finally understood what was happening. He said, go and lie down. Answer God, say, I am listening. He did so. And that was the beginning of Samuel's life as a prophet. Let's examine this text for a moment with the same eye that Hershowitz uses when discussing his own sons. Let us ask ourselves, what can we learn from the way that the children act in this story? Samuel lies awake at night. He hears the voice of God, but he doesn't understand who it is that's speaking to him. He is enthusiastic, he is excited, he's confused. Most of all, he thinks that it is his parental figure, the man raising him, calling to him in the night. When Samuel hears God, he thinks it is Eli. There are moments when parents speak and call, children hear and listen, and to them it is as if they are hearing the very voice of God, a voice which contains great authority. And with great authority comes great responsibility. Hershowitz has an entire chapter about authority in his book. In it, he explains that philosophers understand a vital difference between power and authority. Power is the ability to bend the world to your will. When you have power over someone or something, you have the ability to make them do what you want. As a father, Hershowitz has power over his sons. And he drives the point home, describing the struggle to get his youngest boy to simply put on a pair of shoes. A struggle that I imagine every parent, older sibling, and grandparent in this room has felt on a spiritual level. Who has the power in that moment? Is it the father who can, with a simple, "Fine, I'm going to put them on you," force the issue? Or is it the child who, well, his boy can't stop the father from putting the shoes on, can just go completely limp, or throw a terrible fit, or be so loving and so cute and so affectionate that the child finally gets his way and doesn't have to put on the shoes after all? Parents are in this relationship with power, but Hershowitz makes clear that power is rarely one-sided. But authority is. Authority means you have the right to make the rules, to set the commandments. It goes beyond the ability to force people or convince people to do what you want. It is the right to tell someone what to do. Parents have power, and parents have authority. Hershowitz lays it out very clearly. Parental rights and responsibility are a package deal. You get to boss your kids around because it's also your job to take care of them. When you get to make the rules, when you get to ensure that people follow the rules, when you have authority and power both, it is also your job to protect and to care for the people you are making those rules for. The choices that we make, the lines that we draw, should not be rules for the sake of being rules. They need to be rules that make things safer and kinder and better for the people who follow them. This is a lesson we learn from our children about the world. This is a lesson we learn from our children about children. Whether or not someone thinks you speak with the voice of God, when you have the power to change another person's life, because in you rests both power and authority, it is also your obligation to use that power and responsibility to build a world which will take care of them. We know this well. This is the promise that we as Jews have made to our children, to the generation that comes next. This is the core of the Jewish idea of shalshelet HaKabbalah, the transmission of the generations. As Jews, we have made an unspoken vow that the previous generation would do everything they could to build a better world for us, a better world than the one they found themselves in. And we, in turn, continue that oath to use what we have to build a better world for those who come next, and to those who come next, they too know that they will inherit a world they need to make better for their own descendants, each of us making choices to continue this chain. And you may think to yourself right now, well, yes, Rabbi, I know. We know. We learned that from our parents. We learned it from our grandparents. We learned it from the generation of blessed memory that came before us, who made this very place, who made this world that we find ourselves in right now, who made this world better for us through their sacrifices. And while I have no doubt that this is true, I would like to flip our understanding just a little bit and say, we know about this idea from our parents, and we hear about this idea from our teachers, but we learn it. We learn it in our bones and in our souls from the interactions we have with our children, with the interactions we have of the next generation. Just as your parents learned it at the moment they interacted with you, and just as their parents learned it the moment they imagined their own children for the very first time. We call you Avinu. We call you our Father, our parent. We repeat these ancient words during the sacred day. We call out to God, just as we have learnt from our children today that we have an obligation to build a better world. What will God learn from us on this Rosh Hashanah? In the Talmud, there is a famous passage in Bava Metzia where Rabbi Eliezer is making an impassioned case for all things the kashrut of an oven. Nobody is agreeing with him, despite him being the prominent legal mastermind of his generation. But he's so certain that he is right that he calls out and he says, if the law is with me, if I'm right, this carob tree is going to prove it. And the tree miraculously, boop, picks itself up and throws itself hundreds of yards away. But the other rabbis will not be swayed. Eliezer, they say, we don't make laws according to carob trees. Eliezer was not done. If the law is with me, if I am right, this stream will prove it. And this nearby babbling brook began to babble the other way and flow backwards. Eliezer, we don't make laws according to streams. If the law is with me, if I'm right, the very walls of this building will prove it. And the walls began to shake and crack and bend, leaning inwards. Eliezer, we don't make law through walls. Fine. If I am right, he said, then heaven itself will prove it. And certainly right at that moment, a voice called out from heaven, the law is with Eliezer. And the sages ignored it. They turned to God and said, Lo b'shamayim hi, the Torah is not in heaven. You gave it to us here at Mount Sinai. You might be God, but now it's up to us how we determine how we use the Torah. And it is said that at that moment, the prophet Elijah saw God laughing. And God was saying, my children have triumphed over me. I'll ask again. What do we have to teach God on Rosh Hashanah? The Talmud 2,000 years ago understood the same truths that Hershevitz does in his book of philosophy. That any moment we listen to the next generation and let them lead us through their vision has the capacity to be remarkable. That children can reveal truths that we, who have grown up and have so much knowledge, have simultaneously closed ourselves off to. That the next generation can surprise us and shake us and take our long-held assumptions and upend them in all of the best ways, if only we give them the opportunity. The better world that we must build for our next generation is one they have a share in teaching us about. If we call God Avinu, our Father, then we are God's children. And in this section of the Talmud, God chimes in. The kids are having a heated discussion, and those children, like so many generations before them, turn to their parents and say, "We love you, but also we've got this." And it's a stunning moment. And the Talmud teaches us that God delights in that stunning moment. God celebrates seeing that the children are growing up, taking on responsibility, solving problems for themselves just the same way a human parent does. God sees that, yes, power and authority both are for divine and mortal parents alike, but the world our children are building needs to be guided by their hands. After all, it's going to be their world. There are things that the next generation are ready to teach. If we, their elders, who have done such a great job protecting them, are still open to learning. It's a lesson for God. It's a lesson for us, too. In his book, Hershovitz concludes, philosophy shows the strangeness and wonder lying just below the surface of even the commonest things in daily life. Kids are alive to strangeness and wonder, at least until we train them not to be. I hope that you'll help your kids in your life hold on to it, and I hope just as much that you'll find it again for yourself. On the steps of our temple, I was astonished at the beauty of my daughter's uninstructed act of kindness and all of the questions it opened up in me. In that moment, I had the chance to see the world through her eyes, and it was full of strangeness, and it was filled with beautiful wonder. There was magic to it, lightning in a bottle, a spark of the miraculous. That Shabbat was not a moment I expected. It was not an interaction I could predict, and I don't think I could duplicate it if I tried. And I look forward to the next one, the next moment of strange wonder, with every beat of my heart. Malachi, the prophet of God, spoke and said, "And I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and awesome day of God. I will turn the hearts of children to their parents, the hearts of parents to their children. May this year be one in which we take the time to observe the great wonders of life through the eyes of the next generation, whoever that may be in your life. May we delight in all the ways that they yet surprise us and triumph over us. And may those ancient words of prophecy yet come to pass. May this be a year that our hearts are as one, that together we may build the world we all need. Shana Tova Umetuka, a sweet and happy new year for us all.